why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah,
What kind of role are you going for? A little bit on your background, and what are you looking for in this session? Do you want to get more tips? Do you want to just practice um, questions? Yeah, let me know what sounds good for
awesome.
you.
Yeah, of course. So a little bit of background about myself. My name is Viha, and I've been actively interviewing because, yeah, like um, my company, they decided to shut down our team here. So yeah, I've just been like looking at other options and hopefully land something this year.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, my and I yeah, like I mentioned, like I do have an interview on Friday with like a dedicated 1 hour slot, like 45 minute slot of a behavioral round. Usually, like at other companies, they have a behavioral round integrated as part of like the interviews in itself, right? Like for example, Amazon, they have like a leadership section within each tech interview, but here like this is a dedicated behavioral round. So, and I've never practiced a behavioral round, and I'm not really sure like where I stand other than my own judgment of myself. So I think like getting a review, getting some tips, especially for the behavioral round, would be super useful. And yeah, I actually have about like 4 years of experience as a software engineer, and the role that I'm interviewing is for a backend engineer. Basically, like my experience has been as a backend engineer for the past 4 years, and um, so the role that I'm interviewing for is also for a backend engineer. And yeah, I'm interviewing for Stripe. And yeah, I was or am with Amazon, so now I'm shifting and like looking for other options outside. Um, yeah, like I have a bachelor's in computer science as well as a master's in computer science, and yeah, about like 4.5, 5 years of experience as a software engineer. Um, yeah, that's about myself, and I think like again, just reiterating, like I behave like yeah, other than my own self judgment, I'm not really sure like how or where I stand in terms of like a behavioral round and what like managers or like what a hiring manager looks for during these rounds. So I guess like a good like yeah, just like good tips and like if we could spend some time just practicing also would be nice. So maybe like that way I can get like real time feedback on what I can do, like what I can improve. And I think like yeah, just in terms of like nerves as well, like before an interview, I think this having like a mock session will help there. Um, yeah, I think that's a little bit about myself.
Awesome. All
Yeah,
right.
thank you.
So in that case, probably what we can do, I will ask you a question,
Okay,
and based off that, you'll give an answer, and then I'll give a little bit of feedback and tips. How does that sound?
awesome. Yeah, I think that sounds good. I can do that. Yep.
Great. Okay. So, question number one. Can you describe a time when you made a mistake at work? How did you handle it? And what was the outcome?
Sure. A time where I made a mistake at work. I'm just trying to recollect if anything pops up in my mind. Uh, yeah. So most recently, um, I was given a task where like this is a completely new code base, and I only had like 15 days of time to get like 15. Like I was um okay, yeah, sorry. Let me just restart. I'm just like recollecting my thoughts. So yeah, like my most recent project, like this, I had to work on a different team's code base to get a task done for us. Like basically, like this was a dependency on another team, and they didn't have the capacity to get that done. So I worked on this as an away team effort. And so this was a front end work, and most of my experience has been as a back end engineer. And this like I think I'm the like short long story short, the mistake I made here was in terms of like effort estimation. um I was working with a fellow engineer from their team who had like a document written in terms of like, oh, how much would the effort look like to get this task done. and just brushed over the things with him. Like, okay, what are the to dos, and like what do I have to do in terms of, like, to get this task done. And this effort was estimated to be 15 days, but then the mistake I made was not realizing that this did not account for like the onboarding time that I would need to understand the code base and understand the new, especially because this is front end. Like, I had to get, like, get accustomed to the different frameworks that they were using. I did not account for the timeline there. And there was another thing where, like, I took their word for it instead of like going back and researching on my end before confirming that this can be done in 15 days. So I think that was one mistake that I did. But like, quickly, when I quickly realized this when I started onboarding. Like, I think that, like, day 2, I realized like this is not a 15-day effort, and even for somebody who had the experience to get this done, this is definitely not a 15-day effort. So I went back to my manager, discussed this, made sure that he was aware, like, showed the errors, especially because, like, even the onboarding and like setting up the code base, the instructions were not right, and getting this set up in itself was going to take longer than they had estimated. So I think that was a mistake. And like, moving on, I've learned from this, and I take my time to give out efforts and estimates. I don't just, and I also make sure that I do my deliberate effort in terms of, like, researching and making sure what's being given to me is as accurate as described by them. So I think this, and also like making sure that I have like a paper trail of communication to go back to in terms of proof or like verification. I think that was one good thing that I did during that time, because like there was a like, we track these issues in a sim, and like there's a conversation going on there, and I made sure that I kept that updated with the latest information of what was going on, and that kind of helped me go back and like show, hey, this is what was said, but this is not true. This is what's going on, and I think like keeping a paper trail there helped. Yeah, I think that's my quick answer.
Gotcha. Can you tell me more about how the paper trail helps, and what type of issues does it specifically help you with?
Yeah, of course. So like, the major issue that I had was trying to set up an environment, right? Like, setting up my environment to make sure that I'm able to like test any changes that I make in beta and gamma environments. And so they had provided a Wikipedia page that gave the instructions on setting this up, but that was like pretty outdated. And when I began setting this up, I quickly realized that this document was outdated, and like the instructions were not right, and most of the code base was lagging. And they also had like only one engineer who was aware of like the entire code base, so like the content within the code base. So I left these messages in there, like, hey, these instructions don't seem right, this is not working, and I had so and so errors, like, can I get some more help, like, have you seen these on your end? And in the meanwhile, while I was waiting for their response, I also had these Slack groups where anybody who's trying to set up these like JavaScript or like a beta and gamma environment to test these front end setup, I reached out there as well, and I noticed like a couple of people were having the same issues there. Um, and like, this was so, and then turns out that this is going to be a hard blocker, because there's no solution to it. Like, this is just like outdated code base where like support for this was no longer out there. So then I need, like, then I reached out to them, um like, and because there was no response from them yet, like, I made sure that my manager was aware, tagged them in the sim, basically the issues that we were tracking. And I also made sure that their manager and my manager was aware of like the issue going on. Like, I also left messages of like, hey, this is the issue. Looks like this is going to be a hard blocker in terms of like testing this front end. Like, are there any other way that I can set this environment up? Are there any other way that I can take a look at? So there's like timestamps of when, like, what was, so there's also a timestamps of, hey, like, this is what was agreed on, like, number of like, these are the to dos, like basically like 4 or 5 features that I would have to add as part of this task, and the timelines mentioned like how long it would take for me to even like set up the environment. And I mentioned that, hey, just setting up the environment, which was allocated to be like a day, is not true, because waiting for permissions from other teams, that in itself was taking like 2 or 3 days longer. And like, digging deeper, I took a look at the code base to see um like how long their efforts would take. So so this task was actually to make sure that that there was a calendar UI and we had to make that accessible. So basically adding keyboard navigation and making sure that the speech like the text to speech softwares were able to identify components within the calendar and like read them out loud to um, read them out loud. And I quickly noticed, like, for that to happen, there are some coding standards that should have already been part of the code, and I would just have to add like certain features on top of it, basically like add tags and things like that. But this code was did not maintain those standards, which meant like I would have to make additional relevant changes to that code base, which was outside of the scope of this task. So I quickly realized that in the day or two, and I mentioned like this, you've estimated this to be 2 days, but that's not true because like there's other dependencies that we will have to ensure that happens. And I left a paper trail with links to these codes, with links to any online resources that I found. So yeah, leaving that paper trail helped.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Mhm.
Um, okay, so a little bit of feedback.
Yeah,
You phrased this as leaving a paper trail.
yeah.
Leaving a paper trail, it can have some negative connotations. So
Okay.
like what I think of when leaving a paper trail is essentially gathering information where you can assign blame to somebody else. Like that's the context I usually hear leaving a paper
Okay.
trail used in.
Okay.
Um, another way that you could phrase the same thing based off of what you described
Yeah.
is, I'm gathering the documentation in one place for future use. So when you phrase it that way, it's more of like, hey, this was a messy code base, but I'm
Mhm.
going to gather all this stuff that I learned for future people not to have the same problem as I have.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Um, that's actually good. Yeah. Good way to phrase it for sure. Because that's also part of what I did. Like writing a document and writing
Mm-hmm.
like because I did go back and write the some my learnings and how to set up this code base. I wrote like a document and how to get the code base up and running, like how do we test this in beta and gamma environment with the old stuff not supported anymore. So yeah, I think that was a good point that I should have brought up. Thank you for that
Mm-hmm.
feedback.
Yeah, a lot of stuff is all about phrasing. Like you're literally saying the same thing, but in
Yeah.
different words. And,
Yeah.
in corporations, people, they take certain phrases a certain way and eventually just learn which ones to use.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Um, just make a note for myself.
So if you were to, mhm.
So I just like had a quick question. Like, is there a way for me to like I guess like form I know the star pattern is what people usually suggest, but like beforehand, before a behavioral interview, like can I come up like is there a way for me to like come up with like a list of topics that I can talk about for these questions that are going to be asked, and like what are your recommendations in terms of like what kind of topics should um I guess like should I have or like prepare for in advance?
Yeah. So how I recommend doing it is
Yeah.
you come up with maybe 3 or 4 stories from your
Okay.
career that
Okay.
really, show like what you have done. So for example, I usually take about 3 projects that I worked on,
Okay.
and they like really showcase a few things. Um, Let me actually, I have a list of what we want to show. Do behavioral. Okay, so here's basically what we want to show. The first thing is handling challenges. So that's
Okay.
the first question that I asked you. Like when you make a mistake,
Okay.
how do you handle that mistake?
Gotcha.
When you're stuck on a problem, how do you handle that problem? So that's handling
Gotcha.
challenges.
Okay.
The next one is going to be mentoring and team building. So you talk about how you have helped your coworkers and how do you
Gotcha.
unblock your coworkers. And
Gotcha.
also you talk about your mentors and how you learn.
Okay. Oh
The
yeah.
next
Okay.
one is communication. Okay.
Okay.
And we could go through the rest. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Cool. Any other questions for this?
No, I think for now I'm good. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Let's give this one a shot. So communication and diplomacy. Basically, what you want to do here is show your communication skills. Um,
Mhm.
so, for example, in the story that you told, you might want to elaborate on how did you have conversations with the people who blocked you. Typical question that gets asked is, give an example of a time when you had to understand and work with constraints of a project, and how did you navigate those constraints?
Okay. Um, Constraints of a problem.
hmm And
Okay.
usually, when we're talking about constraints, it could
Yeah.
be time, it could be resources, knowledge you have, blockers you have.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Um, Constraints of a problem. How did I navigate through these constraints? Okay. So, I'm just trying to think of like one project that I can help answer this question. Um, so part of my work was basically like to build a system where um, um, build a system that can be a one-stop place to track a status of an order. So basically, like orders at Amazon, right? Like they are owned. Like a status of an order is owned by various teams within Amazon. So like if an order was created, the payments being processed, refunds, cancellations, if these are different statuses of an order. They handled the intricacies of how these are handled. Like they're handled by different teams across Amazon. But then for our team, we needed like one-stop place where we can confirm like, okay, this order ID was for our product, and like have an internal system instead of like having us on board to these multiple systems uh, again and again, but just have like a one-stop place in like an internal team system that has already made this onboarding process, and it's easy for us to like just subscribe and like learn, okay, what's the status of an order for this order ID at this particular timestamp. Um, so the complications here is like we had a defined timeline, right? Like this is when we had like a beta launch that was upcoming, and by this is the time that we needed to get this out. But the complications here is like when we have like multiple teams that we have to depend on. How do we align our timelines with their resources and their times, right? Like how do we align there? So the one thing that helped here was like this was an SPP goal. So like there was already enough pressure from the higher ups, and we knew, okay, this is an important project. So we could leverage that. So we began like a friendly conversation as an exploration. This was the idea, like this is what we have to get done. So we began like a friendly conversation with these like three or four like sister teams to understand like what their timelines look like, if if they had resources available, like how do we make this work. Um, like took a design document from our end, like went to them and be like, hey, this is the design, this is what we're trying to achieve. Like, do we have like are there any resources already available on your end that we could leverage without having to like need a dedicated resources for their from their teams, or like not having to utilize their time. And luckily, like they gave us a bunch of documents for us to go through to read and understand how we can, make this happen without their intervention, without utilizing an engineer from their team. I think that in itself helped. So it turns out like this kind of requirement had come from like there were a couple of teams where these kind of requirements had already come in before, so they had a system where you could just like easily, get permissions for VPCs, get and then like just subscribe to their SNS topics, and that gave us like these statuses. But there are other teams who did not have something like this already existing, and there we needed some more effort. So that's when like so this is where we like came up or like came up with the bottlenecks. These are the bottlenecks. This is where we'll have to spend some more time. How do we how do we make this work? And then we worked with their teams, discussed the timelines or discussed like what is a possible timeline from there and that we can make this work, and can we align on can we come to a middle point? Hey, this does not work. This timeline that you're saying does not work. Like, is there another way that we can work? And then we decided to like, okay, we're going to send an engineer from our team to make this work. Like, can we get some kind of support? And then that's when we decided like on a middle ground, on a middle timeline that worked for both our teams. So I think this was one way that we've helped navigate constraints, especially in terms of like timelines and resources. Yeah.
Gotcha. And what was an example of a conflict that you had where you couldn't find the middle ground at first, but eventually you worked through it? Like,
Okay.
take me through one of those conversations.
Okay. Sure. So at first, I ensured like I didn't want to leave like just Slack messages to, and then like basically you get a point of contact from their team. So reaching out through like I want to have like a friendly conversation even before we get into work, like get to know each other, have a friendly conversation, and then move on to the actual work. So one, I would usually just reach out to them through Slack and like, hey, how's it going? My name is Viha and I'm from this team, and like this is I just want to see like if you had some time to catch up. And I would wait for the response. If the response back was Slack, it was great. That means they had the time, and then like I would continue the conversation there, set up a meeting with them, a one-on-one meeting with them, and then like go through my design document, explaining like this is what we're trying to do, and what's your timeline, and a lot of the time the first meeting wouldn't come have definite answers. Instead, it would be more like an exploration for them as well. They would go back with the design document with our requirements, and explore within their teams as well, like what we're requesting, is that even possible, or like how would that work in terms of timelines for that team. And then we would have another team, and then I would set up like another meeting after a day of revision, and then when they were ready to come back to us with their requirements and with their answers. And I would take those, and they'd be like, hey, in order for us to get this feature done, we have this available, but we don't have this available. So I would write that down in a Wikipedia page, and basically like in a document of for this feature to happen, like these are the gaps, and these are the timelines that's needed to cover these gaps. And then I would learn from them, like, is this something that they can do? Is this something that we can do? Like, how can we help from our end to cover these gaps? And if they were open enough for us to like come update their code base in order for us to get this feature done, like I would note that down, and I would also ask like a rough estimate from their engineers, like, okay, how long do you think this would get done for somebody who's like coming and working from another team? Or is this already planned in your in your like quarterly goals? Like, is this something that you uh, plan to get done? And if they had that information, I would note that down, like write down their timelines. And then I would collect that document, go back to my team, have a discussion around these timelines, what works for us, what does not work for us, and then gather those thoughts with the product manager, with our managers, and our like my peers, grab those, and then go back to the engineers and go back to the engineer from their team again, have a meeting, and then essentially like when it comes to like two different teams and resource allocation, I would let the conversation be taken care by my manager. Like, I have now provided the information that he needs in terms of like what's the gaps needed for us to get the stuff from point A to point B. And then and then this would enable my manager to like continue the conversation with their team in terms of like resource allocation, and like, can we do this away team work, or like can their team do this away team work. Yeah.
Gotcha. Let me just finish taking those together. Alliteration and Cool. So the last thing that you said, it's very important. What I heard was your job is to gather all the information needed for your manager to negotiate
Mm,
this kind of project.
mm,
There are a few ways that you could phrase it better.
okay.
Um, yeah, I would basically make this answer a little bit shorter. The
Mm,
important parts is basically how you handle this conflict from start to end. So what I heard was, you ask for time to catch up.
yes.
You go through your design document, you
Yes.
ask for their timeline, and you
Yes.
might not have an answer in that first meeting, but they go
Mm,
back and explore with their team. And then
yes.
you get their timeline and their details. A lot of times they don't have resources that they could share.
Yes.
Um, but they might have an existing system, which would cut down on a lot of work. Um, you also work to identify the bottlenecks.
Yes.
And once you have all that information, you
Yes.
basically detail everything that you need. You give
Yes.
it to the manager, and they help actually figure out how the teams will work together. So,
Yes.
yeah, I think that kind of story, especially if you make it concise, is a really
Mm,
good story.
yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. I think, like, my thought, I should like, I think in terms of system design, you say scoping down my thought process. I think that kind of would have helped.
Hmm.
Yeah. I could have
Yeah.
summarized this in
And
like
you could
at least.
practice this a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, like once you tell this story like 10 times, 20 times, you basically know those key parts and it
Right.
becomes a lot more concise and easier to tell. But that ending part of you gathered everything needed in a nice little packet, and then the
Yeah.
manager is able to use that packet to move things forward.
Yeah.
Cool. Good job.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome.
Okay. All right. So the other thing that we're looking for is creativity. Describe a challenging problem you faced and how you approach solving it creatively. So there's a concept called perpendicular solutions. So a
Okay.
lot of times you have a conflict. So, it seems that there's a problem that you can't solve, like there's a technical block, a resource block, some kind of inter-team block. But then you take a perpendicular solution where it's not a black and white problem, and you solve this problem using something outside the box.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, yeah. Um, I can talk about this. Um, so so this is like pre-release. We were prepping to make sure that our systems are all aligned and we are prepared preemptively in terms of like monitoring and alarms in case in case anything goes wrong. And like during so part of this was we were also doing load balancing. And during load balance, like when my fellow engineers was doing load balancing, I was on call, and I kept seeing these latency related tickets to that service. It's like, okay, maybe it's because of load balance, like because they're hitting the system with like they're trying to test the system, hitting it with like 50 TPS, 100 TPS to see how this would perform. Okay, issues with latency would make sense, but then what I quickly realized is this pattern did not match to the load balance testing, but we like I and historically I just like searched the title of that ticket, and I noticed there were at least 15 or 16 more of these tickets, which was beyond the timeline of the load balance testing what was going on. So what I did was quickly um, took a look at the timelines to see if I can pattern match this to something. So um, had just took the first 10 of them, wrote down the timestamps of like, okay, this is the timestamp of this when this was happening. And I noticed a pattern when like these lags or these latency issues was showing up every time a deployment was happening while somebody was trying to make a request. So basically, like while somebody's making an API request, at the same time, if a deployment was happening in that code base, or in that setup and environment, this was when we were facing these. So it was showing up as latency issues. And on digging deeper, I quickly realized that we were not equipped to handle like having latency issues during deployment is not great, because this means that we would be blocked in during like daytime usage when there's actual customer data coming in and we have to make deployments. This will be a big blocker because our customers will be left hanging and not receive like a response to a request in itself. And I quickly realized that what they had stated in terms of like, so this was a project that we had received from another team, because there was a transfer of projects. And they had a document where they mentioned that they've set up auto scaling and that they've set up like the CPU utilization, the CPU usage, like all of this was set up, but that did not reflect in the actual environment. So I guess there was a miscommunication, there was a gap. So updated that, but I still noticed a latency issue even after updating our code base to increase the CPU and the memory. And then I realized, okay, and I quickly used our internal resources to search through this error, like search this issue that was going on, and like a couple of people had faced these issues. And then we had to think outside the box, because like turns out this was a known existing issue and we needed like a solution for us to get through this. Like not deploying during like customer awake times would not work, because we are working across regions and across time zones, so that was not a solution. And I decided to reach out to an AWS customer service agent and try to get their help. And I think like this was one thing that we had never tried, or like at least I hadn't tried on my end, was to actually get help from the AWS team in itself, right? Like, and turns out that they provided like a couple of to-dos and kind of helped get this latency down during deployments. And yeah, just short story, like long story short, like reaching out to the AWS team, or like reaching out to the AWS customer agent helped, and they had an ongoing GitHub issue for this, and like I interacted with them in this GitHub issue, and wrote down like my findings and the issue that we were having, and then received suggestion from them directly from the AWS team. So I think this was a good way for me to navigate this issue. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good answer. For some reason, yeah, we always try to solve things inside the company.
Yeah.
Or I guess like usually we try to solve things by ourselves. Maybe we reach out to other teams, but for whatever reason, like very few engineers reach out to external resources. I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but yeah, like you might want to give a little bit of background about like highlighting this is like engineering culture.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
This
Yeah.
is engineering, not to reach out externally. Okay, what's our next question? Boo, 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 boo. So there are a few other, okay, mentorship. There we go.
Okay.
Can you share an example of how you've mentored a team member to help them improve their technical skills and their communication?
Yeah, of course. So I had about a year back, I we had hired an intern, and I was also like looking to like get promoted and learn, like basically grow within my own role. And having a mentee or like somebody that I could navigate through to get them like from point A to point B, and like improve in their like help them make progress in the time that they are with the company, would have helped showcase my skills as in my mentorship skills as well. So yeah, he was an intern, like just still in school, like second year school, and who wasn't aware of like how, and this was his first professional internship experience, right? Like who wasn't aware of like how things work within a big organization, especially in terms of like professional fronts. Like how do you communicate your issues? Like how do you and I think like I tried to apply my learnings and the issues that I had and try and see if I could help him there, right? Like what issues I would face issues in terms of confidence and like how do I and being afraid of not knowing things when I reach out to my mentors. I think that was the biggest gap that I had. I want to ensure that he was comfortable enough to reach out to me in whenever he had any issues, like any problems or big or small, right? Like it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to fail because that's how you learn and come back and learn and grow from there. So I think that was one important thing for me to communicate and let him know that it's okay to ask questions, and especially in like a team design discussion that are going on, right? Like people are usually afraid to ask, oh, I don't understand this, like can you explain this further? Especially as a new engineer, especially as somebody who hasn't had any experience and who wants this internship to be converted full time. They feel like there's a lot of stake, and asking such kind of questions is not great. But I ensure that he was aware that it's okay to ask these questions, especially during a design document review, because even senior engineers ask these kind of questions, and it's completely okay. So made sure that he was confident in that terms, and I also like so part of the way this internship works is I have a design document and I help my intern complete this to fruition, right? Like bring this to production. Like my initial having I had a design review with him, ensure that he understood what was going on, and ensure that he was asking me the right questions, and helped him in the beginning. I helped him in terms of answering these questions directly, but also providing him the resources of how does he have to look for answers within our internal tools and systems, right? Like what are the resources available? Like we had broadcast videos available. We had like a dedicated Slack channels. We had dedicated internal resources that you could like Wikipedia pages or Sage groups where you could ask a question and fellow engineers across Amazon would help. Like ensuring that he was provided with these resources and he could help himself. So I think this was my experience mentoring him, and he did a pretty good job at the end. And so even during his presentation, he came up confident. He was aware of like every component that he had worked on, and especially like the blockers and how he resolved them. And like we also ended up converting his internship to full time, just based on his learnings and based on the results that he gave us. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, this is a really good answer. There's not a whole lot that I would change there.
Okay.
Okay. So, then I have a few meta questions. So basically, these are more about your strategy of how you build your answers in general. So, have you heard of engineering archetypes?
Engineering architects? No. I'm not familiar with that term. I think I might be, but like I'm just blanking out right now. Yeah, I think I'll.
No problem. Basically, what an engineering archetype is, like usually when you hire someone, you want to give them an image of like, this is my special skill. So, they're interviewing probably like anywhere from 20 to 100 people for this position. And you got to like say something that they'll remember out of all those people. There's a lot of qualified people. So, for example, what my special power is cross-team communication. So I'm really great at figuring out, who has certain answers, who's able to help, what their needs are. So whenever I interview, I highlight like, hey, I am the person. If you need somebody to solve cross-team communication problems, hire me. And the thing is, I won't fit every single job, but the ones who are specifically looking for that skill will be like, "That's my guy." So
Gotcha.
There's a few archetypes. There's a book on staff engineer archetypes, and they outline four categories. The first one is a tech lead. So the tech lead is really good at project management. They're able to understand the project, break it down, and essentially help others on the team approach that project step by step. Then there's the architect. So the architect is more in charge of direction and quality on the higher level. So they might not be great at the little details, but they see the big picture. They handle all the tech debt problems. Then
Gotcha.
there's the solver. So the solver digs into specific problems. So, for example, what you told me about with that latency issue with the load balancers,
Yeah.
it's a weird issue. Nobody really knows the answer. Nobody really has similar problems. So
Yeah.
you navigate the organization. You think of those outside the box solutions of how do you solve this specific issue. And
Right.
then there's the right hand, which is basically helping the manager, and they're good at navigating the organization. So those are just four archetypes, but what is your special skill? What makes you stand out?
I think like there's two spaces that I think I'm good at. One was leading a project, right? Like in terms of breaking, like when we receive a requirement from a product manager, breaking that down to tangible engineering results. Like what do we have to do to get results, or like reach to production, to get this feature done to production, like breaking them down to smaller subtasks, or like um digging deeper on like, okay, does the system already exist within our our company? Can we leverage that? If that does not exist, um what can we do on our end? So I think like I'm pretty good at like breaking down like feature requirements coming in from product, and converting them to engineering requirements, and breaking each task down, right? Like a flow chart of like what do we need to get done, like step one, step two, step three, to even discussing like security uh, alarms, and monitoring, and dashboards, and to like making a nice bow, and like tying the entire package up. I think I do a pretty good job there. And assigning like coming up with, oh, this is the effort estimate needed to get this done, and making sure the product managers are aligned with what's going on. They understand what I'm talking about, and making sure that my peers can take this document, take this requirement breakdown and task estimates, and timelines, and take this and start building off of there, right? Like I think um, I do a pretty good job there, and I've had like experience in at least two such projects where I've done this, like taken a product requirement and brought this to production within like the set specified timelines, with the help of my peers as well. So I think this I do a good job there, as well as um, like a solver. Like if there's a specific problem, like I feel like as an engineer, the more and more experience you get, you feel like, oh, you would have already like you come up with, you see issues that probably already have solutions to. But that's not always true. Every 3 months, there's a new requirement, there's a new problem you're trying to solve. So I think I do a pretty good job there as well. Like digging deeper, exhausting all my resources to get help. And if not, I even reach out to my senior engineers, and I've sometimes also reached out to, like, if I've moved teams, but I am in touch with a mentor from my previous team. Sometimes if there's a tech issue, people are pretty excited to sort of solve tech issues. Like I've also done a good job at like reaching out to them and asking for help. And be like, hey, have you seen this issue? Like, like, do you think what other resources that I can use from there? And so I think I would bracket myself in these two spaces. Um, yeah.
Cool. To solve. So there's two things that I really liked here.
Yeah.
You used the phrase that you put a bow on the project.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of times, engineers, they work on the project, they make the solutions, but then like that last mile, the last 10%,
Yeah.
that's that turns into like another 50%, and it just keeps going
Yeah.
and going. The project never gets finished. So,
Yeah.
this is definitely like a major thing that people look for. Like, can you actually get things across the finish line? And this is
Yeah.
something that you can definitely, emphasize in your answers and in
Okay.
the answers to your questions specifically. Like, hey, this is how I got it over productions. And, I think of all of these different things like the alerts, the logging, the monitoring, the really whatever else you need, documentation,
Yeah.
integration with other systems. Um, yeah, so that would really that would stand out.
Awesome.
And the second thing is like you go to your senior engineers and your mentors, so it indicates that you're good at relationships and you maintain those relationships. And I really like the phrase that others are excited to solve complex issues. So,
Yeah.
that shows a lot of like emotional understanding, which a
Yeah.
lot of engineers don't really have. Because
Yeah.
like sometimes certain types of problems, like if you approach another team, they have deadlines. They're not really in a space to solve your problems, but you go to like one of your mentors, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, this is a very interesting problem. Like, I actually want to solve this problem." So you know
Yeah.
how to use your resources effectively. I really
Yeah.
like that. So I would focus on those two.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so now I would like for you to tell me a story of a project that you did and focus on your archetype. So your archetype is basically a tech lead, and
Yeah.
you are good at putting a bow on your project, and you're very good at using other resources effectively, whether it's technical documentation or other people in the org.
Okay. Yeah. I think I would like to focus on the order status manager, this project that I'm super proud of that I brought to fruition. And this kind of this and I want to talk about this project because this kind of helped my fellow sister teams also utilize the same project for and solve a lot of their issues as well. So I think I'm super proud of this project, especially because it also involved like a lot of inter Amazon teams and like communication with them and really hard timelines to meet to get this project done. And so yeah, so yeah, this initially, basically, like we called our team last mile because, like let's say if a customer placed an order on Amazon, anything that has to happen after that, right? Like all the movements for that order to reach the customer after they've done what they have to do on the UI, right? Like they'd be like, oh, I placed this order. Here's my card details. Here's my payment details. I clicked on place order. And then anything that has to happen after that was something that our team handled. Basically, the shipment, the any in case the customer cancel their order or if they have to needed refunds, and um, so essentially, like the team that I worked for was is called Amazon Auto. So basically, managing a car order, right? Like, and placing an order for a car on Amazon is by far like a biggest purchase any customer can make. So which means like there's added complexities, right? In terms of payments, in terms of like how do we manage this order? Because Amazon cannot sell a car directly. They like we don't own a car or we don't like place them under our roof um in our warehouse. Instead, we deal with like third party sellers. Like we deal with dealers who own cars and then they sell them to our customers that we are providing a platform for. So this project was super important for us in terms of like having to navigate a status of an order after a customer has placed an order, right? Like other responsibilities of trying to communicate um, across like outside of Amazon and like outside of our team within Amazon also, right? Like because there's teams who are handling payments differently, there are teams who are handling um, refunds or cancellations or processing of this order or even like that getting a purchase document that is owned by a different team, but we need resources from there. So this project was complicated in terms of like because of the multiple teams involved, but super useful because we needed this one point stop um, um, uh, with one point stop to know like what's the status of an order. Status of status of a car order. So the product came with this requirement, and they're like, hey, like, is there a way for us to track like if an order ID belongs to you know, a car order or not? Like the only information we have is order ID, but then how do we know that this order ID is a car order ID or is an Amazon Autos order ID? Took that requirement, and so one really good thing that we have at Amazon is like these broadcast videos and Wikipedia pages, especially in the retail world. So I started to dig deeper, like what are the other teams doing? Like especially I started to research like these design documents written by fellow other product teams, right? Like what are they doing to track their orders? So maybe it's like a groceries order. Like groceries order was like very similar to what we were doing with cars. So I took a look there, took a look at their design space of like how are they tracking their orders, which teams are they dependent on, and then like dug deeper, went to their teams documents to know like understand what's going on, and then like noted down the dependency that we might have for a status of an order. Again, like this can go on and on. So what I did was like I scoped this down to just three order statuses. Let's try and get this done for the beta launch, and then we can add additional teams or additional features on top of it. So what I focused on was we need to know when an order was placed. So an order placed notification we need to be aware, and because that's our starting point. And after that, the payments, like when do we process the payments and when are we ready for shipment of this car payment. So I scoped this down to just these three requirements, made sure that the product was aligned, that hey, like we want to work on this as different phases, and let's say this phase A is going to be just these three statuses. And then wrote a design document to get this done, which are the dependent teams, what are the tasks that we need to do, what are the gaps, had a design review, and took this and began the communication with these like three different teams that we needed to talk to. And yeah, so from there we came up with set timelines of like what we can do, and this is when we can deliver. And within the same design document, I ensured that I wrote down, from onboarding to like broke down the tasks. Like, okay, these are the APIs that we need. This is how long it's going to take for us to get this API done. To design the pipeline setup or like infrastructure setup this long, and then the different APIs, and then so we cannot call a project done until we have like monitoring and alarm set up, make sure that the environments were, within a VPC, they were secure, and like talking about like encryption, like do we need to do any sort of data encryption, especially because order IDs and any customer related information is sensitive. So ensuring that we have like, encryption in transit and encryption at rest, like mention those, and then even before we release this as a beta launch, like what do we have to do on our end to be prepared? Like, so that would involve setting up alarms and dashboards and load testing, ensuring that we have like the right certifications from InfoSec, because we're handling sensitive data, like ensuring that they are aware that this, getting their reviews can take a week or two. So like made sure that those timelines were counted for as well. And yeah, so this was a streamlined process where like my peers, like one of my peers took the InfoSec security review, and one of my peers took like creating certain APIs, like onboarding was taken care by somebody else. And like together, this creating this streamlined document helped us, bring this to production. And like this was at least a year back that the initial three phases were done. But today, right now, we're using this project, we're able to support from order creation, order processing, to payments being processed, to refunds, cancellations, as well as like receiving notifications and knowing the status of an order outside of Amazon from the dealers. Like, did the customer come and pick up the car, or did they cancel at the dealers? Did they make the payment at the dealers? Like, all of these statuses is being tracked by the service right now. And the service that I built and initiated is also being used by three different teams within our Amazon Autos team. So the notifications team is using this service because as soon as they get an order created notification, they need to send out emails and text messages to our customers. The CSA agents need emails or notifications, as well as the dealers need emails and notifications. So they've used it there. And I was also able to build off of this project for SLA management, and tracking business metrics, like how many a product was also able to like track business metrics in terms of like, oh, how many orders were created, how many orders were canceled, like how many orders were not picked up by the customers, and this in itself like helped the product to make more business decisions in the future. And yeah, there were more such uses like today that we are using this project for. Yeah.
Let me just finish my notes. First part, focus on problems. All right. So, what I really liked here is you have a lot of very unique problems that, I would not have thought of. Like buying a car on Amazon. I didn't know that you could buy a car on Amazon.
Yeah, we're
And of
public
course, it
now.
comes with,
Yeah.
yeah, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like you could definitely like this is a cool story that people will remember. And I think you should lead with this story. Like, when they're reviewing their 20 possible candidates, they will say like, oh yeah, that person who organized the whole car project on Amazon. Like I really remember that. Like, she dealt with all of these really weird problems. Um, One possible way that you could drive the story home is with that mistake question. So they ask, like, hey, what kind of mistake have you made? And you have this nice story about, like, oh, I made this mistake where I just, like, really underestimated the timelines. I didn't gather enough information. I didn't communicate enough. But you always want to follow these kinds of answers with, and here's how I've grown. And you have a really good story of like, look how far I've come. So in your story, I would cut out like most of the first part, like the first, I would say like 5-10-ish minutes. They didn't really add much to the story. However, so this is what I took away from it. You had a very unique product, selling a car on Amazon. There were many teams involved. What you did was you looked at similar problems. So you didn't just jump to making your own solution. You said like, hey, what are groceries doing? That's like similar because, the supermarket has to do something on their end. Then you wrote the design document. Now, this is the part which really stood out to me, so that we can't call the product done until, and then you started listing a whole bunch of stuff which I wouldn't have thought of. Make sure that encryption works, make sure alarm works, certifications. I don't think of certifications as part of the project. Business metrics, reviews by other teams. And then you kind of went into like, all right, so what is unique about ordering a car? Well, you have to deal with the dealer. They have all these weird statuses, like the customer returned a car or the customer picked up a car. Really interesting stuff. And the more you kind of get people into this story of like, wow, this is a really complex and unique project, and it's a very fun project. This is what they'll remember because people, they work on emotions. They don't really remember like sort of the technical details as much as the emotion of like, wow, this is really cool. So that's a really awesome story, and that's what I would focus on.
Yeah, I think these are really great points. And like just sorry, building off of that, like here's another cool thing with Amazon cars, right? Like traditionally if you go to a dealer and you buy a car and you walk out of it, like as soon as it's out of the dealer's gate, you're done. Like that becomes a used car and you can't return the car. But if you buy this on Amazon, a customer has at least a week's time to make a return. Like anything on Amazon. They can go back to the dealer and be like, nope, I don't like this car. I want to return this. They can exchange for a different car or, just get refunded. Yeah, I think, sorry, yeah.
Wow.
One thing that I want to note.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, again, this is a really cool story. I like it a lot. I think people are going to like it a lot. You should lead with that story.
Awesome. Yep, I'm going to remember that. Talk about. Oh, such like yeah, the order status manager. Awesome.
Cool. All right. So let's finish up. Are there any questions you have for me?
Um, yeah, I think this might not be like a traditional question, but like, do you have any like suggestions or like in terms of like dealing with nerves like during an interview or pre-interview, right? Like you're
Uh-huh.
confident when it's not an interview, but like during an interview that those 45 minutes, what do you do in terms of like nerves? Like what's your thought process or like how do you like do you have like a pre-interview routine that helps you calm you down? Um,
Yeah. Well, the number one thing is just being prepared. You practice your story lots of times. So a lot of
yeah.
times, like when I interview, even if I don't really want to work for that company, I'll take the interview just for practice because,
Mm.
it's very low pressure. If you don't get the job, well, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and like at the same time, it's like a bit more pressure than what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
It feels real. So that's the number one thing. Um, the Let me think about this. What else do I do? Oh, here's the other thing.
Mm.
Don't think about it as like, oh, the employer is like has all the power. Even in this economy, like they are looking for somebody who can do the job. There aren't that many people who can do the job well. So you have as much power, or you have a very similar amount of power that the employer does if it's
Mhm.
actually a good fit. And
Mhm.
it's very similar to say friends. Like
Mhm.
when you're making friends, it's not that like you are a bad friend if somebody doesn't like you. It's that you're just not a good fit together. You have different priorities, you have different values, you have different hobbies. Uh, like all
Yeah.
of these different factors go into making friends. So just think about getting a job as, oh, I'm making friends and cool. I finally found this company that I really gel with. They want exactly what I have to give, and vice
Yeah.
versa.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think these are yeah, that thought process is a really good one. I think that in itself can like calm things down.
Yeah.
Especially like yeah, yeah, we're both trying to like give and take from this. So it's not just like me at stake. Yeah, I think those are really good, great points. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this. And yeah, I'm excited. Hopefully,
Yeah. It
yeah,
was a pleasure.
thank you
You
for your
got this.
time,
You have a
especially on
great
the news.
story. Hmm. Yeah. No problem.
Yeah, I
All
will. I
righty.
will utilize this. Yeah. Thanks again,
Yes.
and yeah, hope you have a great rest of the day and happy New Year's again.
You too. Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.